Hey, how's it going everyone? Welcome back to Keeping Fish Simple. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the 10 most popular fish that are sold here at Keeping Fish Simple. It's coming to the end of the year, and I know a lot of people on YouTube like to do like a summary of their year on YouTube. Now, I thought that'd be a little bit boring for the stuff that I make in the fish room, and I just didn't think the content would make sense, but I thought what better way to make kind of like a summary video than to talk about the fish that I sold this year and bred this year. So that's selling to shops, to wholesalers, and to you guys on my website down below if you guys want to go check it out. In this fish room, I breed fish to make profit, so I breed them and then sell them to a shop for a profit. And yeah, I'm just going to be giving you guys a list of the 10. I went through all my invoices and stuff like that and had a look at which ones sold the most and which ones I made the most money off of. I'm obviously going to try and keep a little bit of privacy for myself in this video, and I'm not going to give you guys like a full financial rundown because I don't have shareholders and I feel like that stuff's kind of personal, but hopefully this video will give you guys some indication as to what species are the most profitable to breed. And I guess take everything as well with a grain of salt, because some fish are going to be more popular in my area, and I've also had success breeding certain things, and you know, everything's going to work out differently for different people. So without any further ado, let's get started. Something I quickly wanted to mention about this fish room is that I've currently been in here for about a year and a half. So that means 2021 was kind of like my full first year in the fish room. So a lot of stuff kind of happened throughout this year where I was experimenting with different species, and to me this setup's kind of a temporary setup until I can move into something a little bit bigger. So this is kind of just like a lab for experimenting with different species, seeing what I can actually breed, seeing what sells, and throughout the year a lot of stuff changed. So at the start of the year I thought I was going to make a lot of money breeding angelfish. Turns out I don't even really breed angelfish anymore, and I haven't bred them for quite a few months because they weren't really viable for this room. So you're going to see a bunch of notes like that throughout the video on the different species that were popular. Coming in at number 10 is actually not a fish, and this is blue shrimp. I kind of started these a little bit later in the year, and basically blue dream shrimp, what they are, they're just kind of like a red cherry shrimp, but they're blue. I found these guys to be a lot hardier than any of the other shrimp in the room, and I've got them down in a tank down on the bottom row of my racks. For the most part, they were probably the easiest thing to breed in the entire room. I think I started with a colony of about 20, and I probably have over 500 of these guys in that tank. And every time I've been selling to shops, the shops order about 20 to 30 of them, and I sell them for about $2 to $3. They're not like a high money species, but I've just been consistently selling them, and they're one of the most popular things. So shops kind of always order them. They're really in high demand. Everyone can keep them. They're really easy to keep. And yeah, the number 10 on the list, blue dream shrimp. I didn't really expect them to be there, but they are. Also, if you guys are wondering why I'm sweating so much, it's currently like 35 degrees Celsius outside, and I'm also in a fish room that keeps tropical fish, so it does get a little bit hot in here. That's why my face is sweating. Anyways, coming in at number 9 is Praecox rainbowfish. These guys are also called the dwarf neon rainbow, and I've been consistently breeding them throughout the year. I haven't produced as many as I want to, and that's kind of because I'm capped by the grow out space in this fish room. There's not a lot of space for things to happen, and I mean, to a lot of people it seemed like there's a lot of space in this fish room. And if I was a hobbyist, which I am, like I do this as a hobby, but if I was purely a hobbyist just trying to enjoy my fish and breed a few things, this would be a perfect room. But since I'm a business trying to make a little bit of money, it kind of does get a little bit capped and hard to make fish. So I didn't produce as many of these as I want to, but I was selling probably to each shop about 20 to 30 every time I went to the shop when I had them available, and I was selling them for about $4 to $5 each. Didn't have enough to take them to a wholesaler this year. Hopefully next year when I upgrade fish rooms, hopefully I'll be able to produce more and kind of boost that a little bit. But they're very popular. Every time I had them on a list, they'd sell pretty quick, and they were one of the easier ones to produce. The fry were a little bit more tricky to raise than some of the other fish that I have on this list, but for the most part, they're a pretty good species to breed for profit. I think if you're overseas and you're in a place where not a lot of people are breeding them, you'd make more money, but for the most part, they were really popular and did pretty well for me this year. And then number 8 on the list is Sterbai cories. So corydoris were kind of something I started a little bit late in the year as well, and I didn't really get the hang of it until midway through the year on how to actually do it. So when you first get fish, you kind of go through an apprenticeship of the breeding. And what that means is you kind of get the fish, breed them, stuff it up a few times until you work out a breeding schedule and breeding routine to breed those fish. And for me, the Sterbai cories were no exception. I struggled with them for a bit for the first half of the year, and then towards the second half, I kind of got really good at it. Again, I kind of just bred them really intensively for a month or two and then didn't really breed them anymore. I did sell a lot of them. I still have a few available. These were mainly popular on my website when I had them quite cheap. I've boosted the price since then because I'm not really breeding them anymore. That would be a really, really good one for a larger facility. The fry were pretty easy to raise. I figured out a way of doing it where I fed them powdered foods because I was feeding different things at the start, but because their fry are really small compared to other cories, they weren't as easy to raise. So once I did figure that out, it made things a lot easier, and every time I had them on a list, I'd sell 20 to 30 for $5 each as well. An annoying thing about them is bagging them. Like, bagging them was pretty irritating because they have that spine that pops the bags, and they also sometimes release toxins and kill themselves in the bags. Besides that, everything was pretty good. If you could produce all the popular cories like albinos, Sterbais, pandas, and things like that, you'd have a lot of success. Yeah, number 8 on the list is Sterbai cories. And then that brings me to number 7 on the list, which is panda cories. So pretty similar to the Sterbais. I was breeding a lot of panda cories this year. I had a little bit more success with the panda cories, I'd say, because they're a little bit easier to breed. The fry are quite big, and I did quickly figure out quite a good method for breeding them. So I threw them in like breeding nets inside of the parents' tanks and didn't have much trouble raising them up. I bred quite a few of them, a pretty similar amount to the Sterbais, maybe a little bit more, and I was selling them for the same price and in the same kind of numbers as the Sterbais. Again, the reason they're above the Sterbais is because they are a little bit easier to raise as fry, and I'd say I did sell more of them this year than I did the Sterbais, but for the most part they were pretty equal in popularity. And number 7 on the list is panda cories. And then number 6 on my list is angelfish. Like I was talking about earlier on in the video, I thought these would be a little bit more popular than they actually were. The reason they're above the other species on the list is just because of the sheer quantity I sold of them. I sold thousands of angelfish this year. Again, I didn't make a lot of money doing it because I was only selling them for $1 to $2 each, and a lot of them just went to wholesale, and it was actually quite frustrating because I did think I'd make a little bit more money. I learned quite a lot about angelfish this year in regards to breeding them. A problem with this fish room is the grow out space. It does look like I have a lot of grow out space, and I do, but that's for nano species, and I wouldn't consider angelfish to be a nano species. So a lot of the time I overproduced the angelfish, didn't have a great space to grow them out, and would either stunt them, or I was just putting like 200 fish into a tank where I could have had 200 of a fish that cost 10 times more in that tank, and yeah, it just didn't really work out that well. In the end, I just stopped producing them, and I've got one more pair of angelfish left, but I haven't bred them for ages, and I don't really plan on breeding these guys in this fish room again. I'll do it in another fish room. I did actually make quite a bit of money breeding the Manica Peru angelfish, so they're similar to like an ultim, but they're not actually an ultim, they're a scalaire, and I produced like thousands of them, and I made a lot more money off them than I did breeding the common ones. But yeah, angelfish was a little bit disappointing, but these are the kind of things you learn when you get into a new setup. And then number 5 on the list is going to be blue-black rams. I'm also going to tie in dark night rams here, but I didn't make a lot of dark night rams this year. I knew that these would be popular, but throughout the year I actually struggled to make them, so I haven't had success with my black rams until basically the last 1.5 months. So it's taken me pretty much a full year to figure out how to breed them. The ones that I was breeding throughout the year, when I was leaving the eggs in with the parents and letting the parents raise them up, I wasn't getting as many yields, but when I did get some available for selling, I was selling lots of them, and I pretty much couldn't keep them in stock. They were super popular. I made lots of money off them because they're quite a high priced fish. It's kind of one of those things where it's a little bit of a monopoly, where I don't want it to be a monopoly, but because there's not a lot available, they're worth a lot. So if you can make a lot of them, you're going to make a lot of money. They were super popular. I sold lots of them, couldn't keep them in stock. Every time I had them on a list, people would buy them. I was pretty happy with my returns on this fish. So when I did have dark nights in stock, I made a lot of money because those guys were worth a couple $100 each. The blue-black rams weren't worth quite as much, but they both did really well for me. And then coming in at number 4 is similar to the black rams, and basically the same story as the blue rams. Again, I struggled breeding these guys throughout the year, but they're a little bit more popular because they're a little bit cheaper. I didn't sell as many of these on my website, but I sold tons of them to shops, and I was selling hundreds and hundreds of these guys to wholesale when I was breeding them with my friend Justin. Lots of them were produced, lots of them were sold, super popular, and next year I'm planning on breeding thousands of them again. I was selling them for about $2 to $4 each, depending on if they went to a shop or a wholesaler, but when you sell 1,000 of them at that price, you kind of don't complain. So I was pretty happy about that, and they definitely belong in the top 5 most popular fish in the fish room. And then number 3 on my list is going to be peppermint bristlenose. As you guys would know, I produced so many peppermint bristlenose this year, it's not even funny. I actually acquired 3 different colonies this year, so I've got 3 colonies right now. There's about 8 to 10 fish in each one of the colonies, and they've been kind of making me about 100 fish each colony per month, give or take. Some colonies make a little bit more, some colonies make a little bit less, but throughout the year I've made quite a lot of these guys, and they're super popular. I sold so many on my website, it's not even funny. I sold a lot of them to shops. I actually didn't have enough stock this year to sell any to a wholesaler. That's always a good sign. If you're selling a lot to the shop and you're not selling any to the wholesaler, it means you're underproducing something that's really expensive. So that's always nice. Here they get about $10 each to $15 each, depending on the demand and depending on who has them. At the start of the year I struggled to breed them, but once I got a couple of really good pairs that took care of the eggs themselves, it made the process super easy. Like all the other fish on this list, I did have mistakes throughout the year where I lost batches of fry and lost batches of eggs, but for the most part I was successful, and did produce quite a lot of them. That's something that I want to continue to produce over the next year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes good with breeding them. We'll obviously see how that goes. They're not as reliable as some other species on this list, so that's kind of what makes them a little bit more expensive. Peppermint bristlenose were a great one for me. And that brings me to number 2 on the list, which is just common bristlenose. So I didn't make nearly as much money on the common bristlenose as I did the peppermints. When I did have these available, I was selling about 100 to 200 per shop, and I was selling for about $2 each to $2.50 each. Obviously that kind of adds up when you're also taking a bunch of other things to a shop. I was happy with that. They were really easy to produce. I didn't struggle producing these at all, and they were just growing out down the bottom of my 4-foot tanks, keeping the tank clean. They were just kind of like a little bit of a bonus fish. Now, the reason I put them at number 2 is just because of simply how popular they are. Every shop bought some of these from me, basically. I also did sell some of these wholesale. I didn't make as much money on them, but I was always selling them, and it kind of worked out really well. Okay, and so number 1, the one you've all been waiting for, is Bettas. The reason these guys are at number 1 is simply how popular they were and the amount of them that I was selling. Now, I way overproduced them. I made way too many Bettas, and it was a ton of work, and I actually didn't make that much money from it, but they were super popular. I've actually got a video on how much money I made from doing that, so if you guys want to click that link, it's up above. I started off breeding really expensive ones, or not really expensive ones, but like the medium priced ones. I kind of oversold those a little bit, and I had lots of really good looking Bettas, but I had to sell them for pretty cheap. So they were really easy to produce. I didn't really struggle too much with breeding them. I produced thousands of them, and I sold lots and lots of them to wholesale, so I ended up having to sell a lot of them for $2 to $3 each. That was a little bit annoying, but I kind of just quickly ran out of space in this fish room, and it was really annoying taking care of individual cups and trying to keep them all separated, and it was just a lot of work, so I kind of stopped doing it. I am breeding a pair of Bettas at the moment just for fun. I don't think I'll actually be continuing to breed Bettas in the future, simply because they're a lot of work and you don't really get a lot of reward for how much work you put in compared to other species that you do produce. So not a great breadwinner. I sold lots of them, didn't have trouble selling them. They were super easy to breed and super fun to breed as well. Those were the 10 most popular fish in the fish room. I again had discus, like you can see I've got, well you actually can't see, but I do have a discus pair here. I bred some discus and sold them. They weren't too popular because they're a little bit more expensive and they're harder to produce. So there's fish like that in this fish room that I did breed this year, but obviously didn't make it onto the list. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a like down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.